Judges, we read about the oppression of the Mideonites and the Amalekites, and how they would rape the land of Israel, and they would wipe out the crops, and they would take the sheep and the oxen and the donkeys and make them their own. It got so bad that the Bible describes them as coming in like swarms of locusts. And it got to the point that the Israelites were so miserable that they quite literally abandoned everything they knew. They abandoned their homes, they abandoned their farms, and they escaped to the hills and lived in caves. About that same time, a young man named Gideon, he was down inside of a wine press. He was beating out the wheat and trying to hide that from these oppressive nations that had come in because they would take his wheat. And while he was down there in this wine press, an angel of God appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." But Gideon, he decided that the best course of action was to argue with the angel and say, "No, clearly God is not with me or with us, because look at the oppression that is upon us." So the angel gave him a gentle history lesson and recounted all of the times that God had delivered his people, had rescued his people. And then he said to Gideon, "Now go and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" Gideon continued to argue with the angel, saying things like, "Well, who am I to do this? I mean, my family is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest of my father's children." And God finally has had enough. He shuts him down and says, "I will be with you, and you will defeat Midian as one man." Finally, Gideon mans up and he's convinced, and he decides to go. And out of obedience to God, he kind of boldly cuts down his father's Asherah pole. He knocks down the altar to Baal, that was his father's altar. He built a new altar in its place to Yahweh, and he took one of his father's bulls and sacrificed it on that new altar. Now this caused quite an uproar, not just with his father, but with also the people in the city, and 33,000 men, fighting men, rallied to his side. What God said about this is, "You know, Gideon, it's 33,000, that's too many. You need to send some of them home." So Gideon does. He sends 22,000 of them home. So now we're down to 10 to 11,000 fighting men, which is still, that's a good fighting force. God says, "No, still too many." So God had Gideon take this army down to the water's edge, and he says to him, "I want you to watch these guys. And as they drink the water, those of them that lap the water up like a dog, that's your army." Ended up being 300 guys. 300 men went up against the camp of the Midianites and the Amalekites. They're, by earthly standards, there's no way they can win this battle. But they went, and they blew their trumpets, and they shattered their water pots, and caused a commotion, and God caused the Midianite army to go nuts and start slashing each other. When Gideon had his 33,000 soldiers, they could have won this battle. They would have won this battle. It was too many, because the Israelites would think, "You know what? Man, we're pretty tough. Look what we did. Aren't we something? We did this on our own." That is not how God works. This was not Gideon's battle. This was not Israel's battle. This was God's battle. Tomorrow we'll take one last look at how God fights his battles for his people. But until then, walk victoriously in Christ.